Driving down the winding country road with the trees looming over her like twisted fingers reaching out to grab her car, Sarah's heart was racing. In an effort to find peace in this tiny village tucked away in the countryside, she had left the city behind. But she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as she got closer to her new house. It was far too quiet in the village. Dogs weren't howling in the yards, and there were no kids running around the streets. It appeared as though the entire village was holding its breath in anticipation of something. As Sarah parked her car and stepped outside into the brisk autumn air, her unease increased. As she made her way to her new house, she could hear the leaves crunching beneath her feet. Sarah attempted to put her worries out of her mind as she unpacked her belongings. After all, she had a tendency to be a little paranoid. However, as the sun set and night fell over the village, Sarah experienced a chill. She then became aware of an oddity. An elderly couple who had welcomed her to the village earlier that day was one of her neighbors, but they were nowhere to be found. At first, Sarah didn't pay it any attention, assuming they had already gone to bed. However, she noticed that their house's lights were off as she peered out of her window. There was no sign of life inside, and the curtains were drawn. Sarah wondered if something was wrong as she felt a knot forming in her stomach. She made the decision to look into it and knocked on the couple's door, but nobody answered. When she turned the handle, it was unlocked. She pushed the door open with a trembling hand and entered. Sarah's footsteps reverberated through the empty rooms of the house even though it was quiet. She yelled, but nobody responded. Sarah walked around to the back of the house and saw the mess in the kitchen. Food scraps were strewn across the counter and dishes were piling up in the sink. Sarah then noticed something that gave her a cold sweat. On the counter, there was a note with shaky handwriting. It said, "They were taken. They'll also take you." Sarah's heart was racing as she stumbled back. She had no idea who they were or what they desired, but she was aware that she had to leave the house. Sarah noticed the door was slightly ajar as she turned to leave. She hadn't just left it like that. Sarah ran back to her own house while her mind was racing. She felt as though something was watching her and waiting for her to let her guard down as she closed the door behind her. She was aware that she needed to exercise caution in this village and maintain her wits. She had no idea that the horror that had been engulfing the village for months had its roots in her suspicions, and that she would soon find herself in the middle of that horror. Sarah woke early the following morning, still feeling uneasy about what had happened the previous evening. The eerie silence that pervaded the village caught her attention as she made her way to the neighborhood store to restock. No one was out and about. No kids were playing. The village appeared to be deserted. In an effort to learn more about the strange occurrences in the village, Sarah struck up a conversation with the shopkeeper when she arrived at the establishment. Sarah insisted on talking about the subject even though the shopkeeper resisted. The shopkeeper eventually admitted that people, animals, and even kids had been vanishing from the village for months. Sarah's heart sank when she understood how serious the situation was. How could something like this occur in such a tiny, sleepy village? The shopkeeper simply shook his head when she asked if anyone had looked into the disappearances. "Everyone is too terrified," he declared. "Nobody wants to think that a member of their own family could be at fault." Sarah's mind immediately went to Martha, the reclusive widow who had spent all of her life in the village. Since arriving in the village, Martha's behavior had caught her attention. When Martha did leave her house, it always seemed like she was carrying something. At first, Sarah had dismissed it, thinking that Martha was just a little peculiar. However, She was now unable to shake the impression that Martha was concealing something. Sarah started to closely examine Martha's behavior in an effort to learn the truth. She watched Martha from a distance, watching her entrances and exits. She observed that Martha frequented the woods on the outskirts of the village, frequently vanishing there for extended periods of time. One day, Sarah chose to follow Martha because she was interested in what she was doing in the woods. She hid herself behind bushes and trees as she followed Martha. Sarah observed Martha engaging in an odd ritual and chanting in a tongue she was unfamiliar with. Sarah couldn't see what Martha appeared to be doing in the woods, but they appeared to be communicating. She understood that Martha was a witch who had been sacrificing the villagers using her supernatural abilities. But she was aware that more proof was required if she was to stop Martha and put an end to the village's horrors. Sarah uncovered a growing number of unsettling clues as she looked into Martha. But she was aware that the remaining villagers were in danger and that she needed to act quickly. Despite the risk to her own life, she would have to confront Martha. As Sarah walked to Martha's house, her heart was racing. She was aware that this confrontation would be risky, but she was at a loss for what to do. She had to put an end to Martha's sinister behavior. Sarah could feel the weight of Martha's curse pressing down on her as she walked up to the house. She had the impression that someone was watching her, and terrifying nightmares were all she could think about. She nevertheless overcame her fear and persisted in carrying out her plan. When she reached the house, Sarah saw Martha standing outside, waiting for her. Sarah noticed the power emanating from Martha as her eyes shone in the shadows. Never before had she felt so small and defenseless. With a low, menacing voice, Martha said, "You shouldn't have come here." Sarah remained firm and prepared herself for the argument. She said, "You've been using your abilities to harm innocent people. It needs to end." A harsh, cruel sound came from Martha's laugh. "Why do I need to stop? I don't care about any of these people. They serve only as atonements for my magic." Sarah experienced a wave of rage and disgust. How could someone be so cold-hearted and evil? She drew the heavy iron rod she had earlier acquired as her weapon. She said, her voice trembling slightly, "I won't let you hurt anyone else." Martha moved swiftly and with strength and grace. Martha easily avoided Sarah's iron rod swing. When Sarah reacted, she cast a spell that released a dark energy blast that caused Sarah to fall. Sarah struggled to stand up while feeling dizzy. She needed to figure out how to end Martha's curse and lessen her magic. A book of spells that she had been studying for weeks came out of her bag as she dug. In an effort to find the proper incantation, she turned through the pages. With her eyes glowing with resentment, Martha was closing in. Although Sarah experienced a wave of panic, she suppressed it. She had to concentrate. After some searching, she discovered the spell she needed. She stretched out her arms, reciting the incantation as forcefully as she could. As the curse was lifted, Martha screamed while writhing in agony. When Sarah realized her opportunity, she swung the iron rod hard and struck Martha square in the head. Unconscious, Martha hit the ground and fell. Sarah inhaled deeply, allowing a wave of relief and triumph to wash over her. Her victory, however, was fleeting. She could see that she was severely hurt, her body battered and bruised from the struggle. She laboriously made her way back to the village from the woods. When the remaining villagers saw her wounds, they were horrified and repented for not believing her sooner. They made a commitment to future open-mindedness. Sarah was aware that she had to leave the village. She had come to make a fresh start, But she had instead become entangled in something much darker. Knowing she had saved countless lives, she made the decision to leave the village and start over somewhere else. Sarah experienced a sense of accomplishment as she left the village. She had overcome her fears and defeated evil. Even though the experience had left scars on her, she knew that she had changed the world. Sarah had moved on with her life after leaving the village a few years earlier. However, she never forgot what had occurred there or the individuals she had helped. A letter showed up in the mail one day. She received a letter from one of the villagers thanking her for her courage and providing an update on what had occurred since she had left. The letter explained how the village had changed as a result of Sarah defeating Martha. After learning the truth about Martha's sinister methods, the remaining villagers began to perceive the world differently. They were more accepting of others, more kind, and more open-minded. The villagers had learned to work together to create a better community, making the village a safer and more welcoming place. They had even established a new custom, a festival honoring the valor of those who had resisted evil. As she read the letter, Sarah experienced feelings of happiness and pride. She had changed the world, and the lives of the people she had saved were now better as a result of her. However, she couldn't get rid of the feeling that someone or something was watching her as she peered out the window. She had a chill down her spine and realized that the horrors of the past were still very much alive. Sarah began to notice strange sounds coming from outside her home as night fell. They grew louder and more insistent despite her best efforts to ignore them. She finally reached her breaking point. She took a flashlight and stepped outside with caution. The trees towered menacingly above, and there was a thick blanket of darkness. Sarah could feel her breath coming in short gasps and felt her heart thumping in her chest. She abruptly noticed motion in the shadows. A figure was approaching her, its steps deliberate and heavy. The figure entered the light when Sarah shined her flashlight in its direction. It was Martha, who had a scowl on her face. Attempts to re-enter the building were unsuccessful. Martha was too strong and too quick. Sarah was seized by Martha, who had an iron grip. Sarah fought valiantly, but it was in vain. Martha had excessive power. "You believed you could defeat me, right?" Marilyn growled. "You believed you could save everyone, right?" Sarah could feel the darkness closing in while her heart was racing. But she vowed to keep trying. She resisted Martha with all of her might in order to break free of her hold. She swung her flashlight, striking Martha in the face directly. Unconscious, Martha hit the ground and fell. Panting and perspiring, Sarah stood over her. She was aware that she had yet again come dangerously close to dying. However, she realized that this was not the end as she gazed at Martha's still form. The gloom was still there, waiting for another opportunity to strike. Sarah was aware that she would never truly be free from the atrocities of the past. She was aware that she had the fortitude to deal with them. However, she was therefore prepared to handle whatever came her way as she stood tall and proud. The following morning, Sarah woke agitated and tense. She was unable to get rid of the feeling that something was still wrong and that the darkness was still present. She observed that people were staring at her strangely as she made her way through the town. She could hear what sounded like whispering behind her back and sense their eyes on her. Even though Sarah made an effort to ignore it, her anxiety increased. In an effort to find a way to defend herself, she made the decision to visit the neighborhood library to do some research on witchcraft and curses. Old books filled the crowded, dusty shelves of the library. Sarah looked through them in an effort to find any information that might be useful. She was browsing when she heard a whisper on the opposite side of the room. Even though she turned around, nobody was there. She abruptly felt a chilling breeze sweeping through the space. She shivered and took a quick glance around, but nobody was there. Sarah's heart started to beat quickly as she became aware that something was undoubtedly wrong. Feeling like she was being followed, she quickly grabbed her books and left the library. She observed the sky darkening as she moved down the street. She could feel the hairs on the back of her neck standing up due to the heavy, thick air. She noticed a figure appear out of nowhere. It was Martha, who had a twisted grin on her face. Sarah attempted to run, but it felt as though the ground was glued to her feet. Martha moved slowly toward her, a gloomy light emanating from her eyes. "You believed you could get away from me," Lisa hissed. "You believed you could defeat me, right?" Sarah experienced a wave of dread. Despite being in great danger, she resisted giving up without a fight. When Martha chuckled and raised her hand, a lightning bolt appeared at her fingertips. Just in time, Sarah enough to avoid the explosion. She swung her books at Martha, hitting her squarely in the face. Martha stumbled backwards while fury blazed in her eyes. Sarah took advantage of the chance and started running as quickly as she could, hoping to outrun her pursuer. Sarah could feel the darkness closing in around her as she ran through the pitch-black streets. She was aware that she needed to find a strategy to permanently stop Martha. Sarah made a sudden turn to face her pursuers with a burst of resolve. With her eyes glowing with a menacing light, Martha was looming over her as she chanted a spell to enlist the assistance of the forces of light. Sarah inhaled deeply. Energy erupted all around her, and a brilliant light emanated from her fingertips. Martha screamed, her body writhing in pain as the light engulfed her. Then, with one last flash of light, Martha disappeared. For a short while, Sarah stood there panting and perspiring. Although she was confident that she had permanently vanquished Martha, she was also aware that the darkness would always remain. Sarah was relieved and proud of herself as she left. With the help of her friends, she was able to overcome her fears and successfully complete her mission. Since Sarah left the village, time has passed. The memories of her time in the village still trouble her despite the fact that she has established a new life for herself elsewhere. She comes across an envelope addressed to her with the village's return address one day as she is sorting through her mail. She tears it open, wondering what it might be as her heart beats rapidly. She discovers a letter from one of the villagers inside. It states, "Hello Sarah, I hope you are doing well as I write this. I just wanted to say thank you for being so brave and giving of yourself. We are eternally grateful to you for saving our village from a terrible fate. The village has undergone numerous changes since you left. People today are more understanding, and we've learned to watch out for one another. We still discuss you frequently, and we all concur that you are a real hero. Wherever you are, I hope it brings you joy and contentment. You will always be loved and respected by our community. Sincerely, John." Tears well up in Sarah's eyes as she reads the letter. With the knowledge that she had an impact on the world, she experiences a sense of closure and pride. She sets the letter aside and exhales deeply, feeling a burden lift from her. She will always have memories of the village, but now they are tinged with a sense of gratitude and hope. She is aware that the world can be a frightening and gloomy place, but she is also aware that there are those who will fight to change it. Sarah moves through her day with a sense of calm and readiness to meet any challenges that may arise. She is confident that nothing can ever change her capacity for strength and bravery.